There is a place where fears and fantasies give weight on substance alone. Legends and lures are examined in a fresh light. Conspiracy theory meets conspiracy fact. We've embraced the possibilities. Now beyond the threshold, you are in the new realm.
Just out of nowhere, we've seen this huge white light coming in over the horizon. I started getting this demonic thought, strange object in the sky. And I tried to scream, and I tried to wake up, and I couldn't. Cosmology, paranormal, and abduction.
The shadow people or the jinn or some other things might fall into demonic in nature. Demonic in nature.
I want to know. All right, we have a great witness account with us today, as well as a few others, but we're going to start off with one of the more scarier witness accounts in the alien realm. If you've heard of reptilians, you're not going to want to miss this. This interview is about, well, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead and tell a story about your encounter.
2003, I had a reptilian abduction at night. I was taken to what looked like a shut-down supermarket type setting. It was sort of it was this interior of the shut-down type of supermarket, and I was forced to fight a reptilian. I mean, essentially, I was brought up to these two reptilians who were they were close to 7 feet tall. I mean, not that much taller than a human, but you know, kind of heavy set, humanoid. You know, pretty broad-shouldered. Both of them had dark, brownish, sort of greenish scales. I didn't see. I know there's a lot of variations of color and scale type, but basically, just out of nowhere, I was thrown into the situation and made to fight one of them. I mean, essentially, they just sort of goaded me into attacking this one, and it was a really violent. It's a really violent, unpleasant abduction experience, and I didn't think much of it, and I thought, well, maybe it was an elaborate dream, because it's a very brief experience. It was almost, you know, like just a few minutes of memory of me being made to fight a reptilian, while another reptilian just stood off to the side and watched, basically, and didn't think much of it. But then, literally a few weeks later, I had the symbol drawn on the hood of my car, which was these 9 dots in a semicircle. It was on the hood of my car, and it was perfect. And I thought it was kind of weird the way it lined up with, and this was May 2003. I thought it was kind of weird the way it lined up with the abduction, but I thought it was just some neighborhood kids. It was probably just some neighborhood kids who were into something occult, witchcraft, or I don't know what, because it looked kind of like a weird occult symbol. It definitely wasn't a gang symbol. And I know what gang graffiti looks like. I grew up in kind of a tough neighborhood, believe it or not. Not that I sound like it, but so I thought nothing of it, but a UFO researcher was passing, or an alien researcher was passing through town a few months later in August. Stuart Swerdlow, who, you know, is kind of notorious in different ways. Yeah, I don't agree with everything he says, but he does a lot of alien research, reptilian research. So I was still interested in this reptilian abduction. So I went and I talked to him, and I brought up the symbol, described it very vividly, and, you know, it was a weird situation because, you know, I see like the blood just like flow out of his face. He's like, that's the symbol for the Draco constellation. That's like their, you know, one of their logos they used to represent it. And, you know, I'm like, you know, that just floored me because I thought, oh, these some neighborhood kids. It was graffiti. I was fully expecting just to find out what kind of witchcraft graffiti or Satanist graffiti it was or something weird and occult. But it was, you know, a reptilian symbol, common and seen in a lot of abductions. So yeah, that kind of floored me. But after that, I didn't really have any experiences for a few years.
Have you ever had any prior experience, any other type of, any other sightings, anything prior to this, leading up to this?
Well, no, the 2003 thing was kind of big, kind of traumatic, because after that symbol, and finding out what it was and how it connected to my abduction, you know, I was a little paranoid, a little afraid, you know, what the implications were because of the reputation reptilians have, and plus, the abduction was so violent that initiation type abduction. But I did some research. I did find out that the initiation type of encounters were kind of common with men and women with reptilian abductees, with a number of them, which is something I've found out from a few different researchers. Which, but at the time, yeah. But between it, no. To the simple answer, no. No.
Okay. And again, I'm just want to get some clarity. Not all the reptilians are bad. It's the ones on the other side of the bad side of the solar system, or the galaxy, that are the troublemakers, from what I hear.
Well, their culture is, their culture is a bit pre-Renaissance. I mean, it's very. The Renaissance kind of tamed, before the Renaissance, European culture was awfully feudalistic. I know we romanticize feudalism, but the fact is feudalism it wasn't the way people romanticize it in the poetry and the stories. It was fighting for very little good reason, constant fighting, constant, everyone carrying swords and being aggressive, and so their culture is a bit pre-feudalistic, but so was Japan until like a century ago. So were a lot of cultures, and
well, aren't they still the underpinning and fundamental aspects of a macho society? Anything like that? Wouldn't you say it's pretty much the same?
Well, people who've encountered the females, and Joe Montato's talked about this. Females can be pretty aggressive as well in their society. So it's not just a matter of misogyny. It's not just a matter of a male-dominated system. Their whole culture is a bit more on the aggressive side. The way they conduct themselves, the way they do things. At the same time, it's almost a very when they're not being aggressive, they're actually they can be very formal, very polite, very. The way they conduct themselves, which is kind of like, again, the Japanese analogy. One of the reasons their culture is so professional, so clean, if everything, is because it's a warrior culture. And a lot of warrior culture throughout history, the way we use the term Spartan to describe something clean and simple, a lot of warrior cultures, when they're not fighting, were very artistic, very formal in other ways, because that's sort of part of their reputation, and that's part of the feudalism thing, is that when you're not fighting, you have to show what a gentleman you are, and how wealthy you are, and how formal and intelligent you are. So it kind of vacillates if the reptilians too. It's almost like a Joe Pesci type thing on a Goodfellas, where they can be very explosive, but then at other times it can be very very professional, very straightforward. It's very which is one of the reasons, frankly, I think reptilian abductees are underrepresented, because even myself, for years, I didn't want to talk about this. They're very intimidating. Reptilians are extremely intimidating.
Well, again, you're saying stature is about 7 foot tall.
Right.
These are big, muscular creatures. Again, they're reptilian. I mean, if they were goldfish, it probably wouldn't be half as intimidating,
Right,
But,
and the long claws that they keep, that
sure.
Obviously they could trim and they don't, and some of them, they're. So yeah, it's kind of like, no one heard about the mob really until after witness protection and people had a way out. There was centuries where people didn't know anything about it. The only reason we know about it is because of witness protection, giving people an out to talk about it. With
Right.
reptilian abductees, you don't really have that out. You don't know if they're going to come back. There's going to be some kind of retribution. And also, there seems to be a pattern of, at least of reptilian abductees, and in my case, which I can get to, where the military harassment seems to be more aggressive if you're a reptilian abductee than if you're a gray abductee.
Now, on that note, the military harassment, you get a lot of harassment, do you not?
Yeah, I've had 2 phones hacked. I've had impossible things happen with my phones.
Now, let's say, for instance, again, your personal encounter, as you say, was with a male, correct?
A few males, yeah. I mean, I didn't have
females or males.
A few males.
A few
a couple
males.
of
Okay.
yeah. Now I don't know if I've seen females, and I just didn't recognize that they were females. But I didn't hear any, because I know other abductees, when they've encountered reptilian females and they hear them talk, they know right away they're female. But I didn't hear any. I could have been in the room with females.
What is their breeding process? Do you know anything about that, or let's move on?
as far as because I've never seen it with my own eyes, I can't. I mean,
Okay, you've never seen a small child one?
I've never seen a lot of people have. I've never seen the children, the younger ones.
Okay.
I know other reptilian abductees say, though, the reptilians, more so in the Greys, will bring their kids with them to work, so to speak. They'll bring them with them during abductions. They'll drag them around to learn things like on the job, the way they educate them. So they do bring their kids around with them sometimes, but I have not because the abductions I had, they were both kind of. It's probably not the kind of thing to have a young reptilian around for, because they're both kind of dangerous and kind of violent, like training type experiences. More for them than for me. But
right.
So
now getting back to the mall. Sorry to go off on so many different tangents, but going back to the mall. You were already a police officer. Just going over this information.
I was in the academy at the time.
You were at the Abbey?
In the police academy at the
academy.
time.
I was saying the Abbey. I didn't think you were a nun, but okay. This was prior to Katrina, so we're getting a timeline. Again, when was this?
This was July, a few months before Katrina.
Before Katrina.
Right.
And now, take it from there.
Okay. Basically, the mall abduction that occurred, and I will go back and get the exact date on that.
Oh, that's fine.
I don't remember
for
the
now.
exact, but it was about 60 days before, give or take. And basically, what happened was I was taken while I was asleep, and I'll tell you why I know for a fact I was abducted the next day, because I woke up with an implant. But basically, I was taken to this mall in the dark, a really dark. I was first thing I remember, I'm standing around with a bunch of people. And I'm actually wearing like BDUs, like nondescript BDUs, but most of these other people were humans, civilians. There's a few other people dressed like me, and then there was even a couple, with these sort of state trooper kind of hats. But that's kind of confusing, because we had local security that would also wear those hats, and we had Jefferson Parish who also sometimes wear those little brimmed hats. So, it could have been any of those three. So, and we're in the dark, and we're standing around one of those central areas in a mall, like more towards where everything
Again,
comes
this
together.
mall, the name of the mall is?
I think it was the local mall in Gretna, the famous one that burned down over 60 Minutes and everything. It looked like that. And there's other abductees who even described a specific flower cart in that mall. Some of these other police and military abductees.
Right.
That, and I remember being in that central area, which did line up with sort of where that flower cart was. But anyways, to get back to, we're standing around, crowd of civilians. This is my first memory, and I've got these BDUs on. Don't remember how I got there. And essentially what happens is, there's this loud noise from the end of the hall, further down the mall. And the mall was really dark. It was dark enough, the lighting was just low enough to not trip over something, basically. It was very, very dim lighting.
Do you think that was there any reasoning that you came out of for that? Was it a matter of intimidation, fear? Was it a matter of that they themselves, being the reptilians, maybe they're more accustomed to a dim or a less light? Do you think that's possible?
Well, I think they
do you have any idea?
I think they were using an actual mall after dark. Now, Joe Montalto disagrees. I do have to sort of concede to him. He's got more experience, and he's had more of these reptilian abductees, police and military, who were taken to this mall type setting. Getting to the core of this mall experience, we're standing there with this crowd of people, and suddenly there's a loud noise at the end of the hallway, and essentially it was a loud bang. It was almost like a flash bang going off. They could have been throwing down a flash bang, but basically at one of these skylights, and there was a lot of skylights in this mall, even though it was dark, and they were dark too. These reptilians start dropping out, jumping down from the skylight with like no rope, which was kind of impressive. I don't know if they threw down a pad, or it was so dark there could have been a pad they were landing on.
That would impress me.
But they're jumping down without a rope and running towards us. And, everyone sort of turns around and starts trying to run, but there was like no room to run to. And it was sort of counterintuitive, and ran a short distance. And the reptilians essentially caught up with us really fast, because they sprinted, as other people have noted, they can sprint like 20 miles per hour with no problem. And suddenly there was a whole bunch of reptilians standing there, and they went through a procedure of frisking people, and at one point they even had me up on stage, like using me as a demonstration, model how they were going to frisk everybody. And it was there's other details out of that are more in depth with how they frisk people. It was a very weird frisking technique. It wasn't like I've done research since then on frisking techniques, trying to find exactly which one they were using. It's not like anyone I've ever seen, because it was like a freestanding frisk. They didn't throw anyone against a wall. It was very rapid, like 5 or 6 seconds per person. And they like hit they hit your pockets. It's like you do a real quick frisk and just sort of shove you off after they're done, like in the direction they want you to go. So, and it was basically, the impression I got was that they were frisking everyone for weapons or stolen items and then just shoving them towards the door. It wasn't.
Do you feel it was a frisking, or was it just purely a matter of contact in specific areas?
No, they seem to be doing a really fast frisk on people, like a really abbreviated, almost like a martial arts type, like frisking someone as fast as you can. Because like in police, you don't frisk someone in 5 seconds. You take it slower than that. But they were frisking really fast, and their frisking technique wasn't like a police one. It wasn't like I said, I've done research. I've been trying to find, because there's even the way they grab one arm. They'll like grab your left arm, and then they'll use their other free arm to just hit your pocket, hit your upper pockets, hit your lower pockets, and then shove you off. And,
so grabbing the arm, what is it, to isolate motion or to?
No, it's similar to like the kind of police,
like a keto
frisking techniques.
Or
the way police always frisk people for weapons if they're going to handcuff someone, so you don't take suspect doesn't take a gun out in the back seat and shoot somebody.
I see.
So they were frisking people and basically shoving them off. But there was another aspect which was very interesting, is that some of them had these type weapons that were like really thin backpacks, not like a flamethrower. It was like a laptop strapped to their back, and then it came over the front like a cross like pattern, like an X. And it didn't look that it didn't look like that significant, except they had a small gun type device attached to them. The ones, and when they were initially chasing people, they were firing these things over people's heads, and at one point they even shot. I remember them shooting a lamppost specifically. There was lampposts in this mall, and the thing just exploded like a plasma torch. And you could look up on YouTube if anyone wants to what a plasma torch is. It's actually a cutting tool that uses actual plasma they use in metalworking now. And because the sparks that flew out, it wasn't like Star Wars or something. It was just like a few sparks. It was like a shower of sparks. It was like, imagine thousands of sparks flying out.
Wow.
And they almost used it like a crowd control device to shoot over people's heads. And you hit like a lamppost, you hit a garbage can, and suddenly it's like whatever it hits turns into like a stun grenade. It blows up right there, but not enough to kill or injure you, but enough to pelt you with sparks and pelt you with shrapnel. So whatever this backpack weapon was, even though it's as thin as a laptop, extremely powerful, like ridiculously powerful. And I remember specifically them shooting it again after the frisk. And this is what's weird: after they frisked everyone and shoved everyone off, I remember, just a brief moment of them firing, like doing another weapons test on one of these things and shooting another lamp. And when they did, I was standing next to this reptilian. This is like the most vivid part of the experience, actually, because I was standing. Essentially, I remember the way the light was reflecting off of its skin, and it was kind of like a frog skin. I wouldn't say it was an alligator. It looked kind of wet. I don't know if they'd recently been wet for some reason, but it looked just kind of, it reflected very well the light. Like the light, it was almost mirror-like. And I remember standing next to this reptilian as he was firing this weapon, and this ray, whatever was coming out, I don't know if it was a microwave beam or a plasma weapon. Probably not plasma, because that backpack couldn't store enough plasma gas. It was as thin as a laptop. So, particle beam, I don't know what kind of weapon it was exactly, what the actual physics of the beam was, but I do know that the weapon produced a lot of heat around the ray, which also kind of ties into the legends of dragons breathing fire, because this weapon was so low profile and fit their form so well that easily, if our ancestors saw reptilians shooting this at people to scare them away, it would look like they were breathing fire, obviously, because people back then have no context for energy weapons or any of that. You just see, a 8-foot reptilian, 7.5-foot reptilian, suddenly there's fire shooting at you. And because people are familiar with snakes and venom, they presume, it must be throwing fire out of its mouth, So
as good as one end or the other,
Right. Well, right. So, I think so. Those weapons are really those weapons are really powerful. I didn't see him kill anyone with the weapons, but I did see him
just startled people.
Yeah, it works really well. If you hit something, it's almost like The Natural. You remember the movie The Natural?
Oh yeah, and they hit the ball and
remember when it hit the
lightning,
light?
Yeah, that's cool.
When the ball hits the lights and they just like explode into sparks.
Oh yeah,
it was like that. It was like The Natural, basically. So it's an effective weapon for crowd control. Of course, he hit someone directly. Go ahead.
You're in the mall. How many people approximately did you see?
30 or 40.
And it's a mix of people, or is it
men, women? Yeah,
more of one or the other?
No, it was mostly men, some women. I mean, it was a really mixed, group.
How many of them versus how many of you?
Geez, I mean, the reptilians. There was a couple. I'd say 20 or so. There wasn't as many as people. I'd say
they all appeared to look the same.
It was, and here's the thing: it's so dark. It's hard for me to get an exact head count when I go back over my images and my memories because it was so dark and it was so chaotic. That's hard for me to get the count. So the count could be off, but yeah, I'm guesstimating.
Now, how is it? Now, someone's sitting out there, I'm sure, in the audience, saying, "Well, how the heck does he know that this is genuine, or how does he know anything in particular took place this night, other than his recollections?" Mm-hmm. Which, of course, are nocturnal, correct?
Right.
What is it that happens to you afterwards that when you woke up the next day? Is it the next day that you...
Yeah, the next day I knew right away. Well, first of all, it was way too vivid to be a dream. But secondly, I woke up with an object, under my skin. No redness, no incision, just a solid object under the skin, like an implant.
That you've never seen before?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And since then... You've had, have you had any unusual things or events that reinforce this as being genuine?
Yeah, I mean, there was other physiological changes around that time too, which, like increased aggression, increased, digestive problems that came up out of nowhere, allergies to foods I was never allergic to. Like, I take a lot of vitamins, but now, since then, I can't. Iron just kills me. Zinc kills me. I can't, heavy metal. There's all these things I can't eat that I used to be able to eat. And then, my sensitivity of hearing, sensitivity, like my night vision increased, a lot of things. Talking to Joe Montaldo, I've gotten some interesting perspectives on that. Well, Eve Lorgan as well, and a few other researchers that basically, as science fiction as it sounds, these physical effects are from reptilians amplifying or activating some kind of dormant hybrid reptilian DNA, which basically the abductees they only choose them because they have some higher level of reptilian DNA than the average population bloodline.
Now, your bloodline, there is some sort of interesting aspects to it, correct? I don't want. This is simple yes or no, because I don't want you to go into that.
Yeah, I could give a...
I would prefer not to.
Okay.
At this stage, because we are going to do some work for you. We're going to get some work done, like you requested. Okay. And that has to do in looking at the implant and some other aspects, some other things that you've agreed to have done.
With us right now is Michael Clean, and Michael has a special guest with him again tonight. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, John. I'm doing pretty good, although suffering through a mild cold right now. Yeah, that's right. I've got a guest for us, Cassidy Oconnor, who is the author of Diaries of the Dark Side. And we did talk with her before, I believe last year, and we had such a great time that I thought we would reintroduce her to the audience. I know we got a lot of new listeners since then, and a lot of people who may not have heard of her wonderful book. And so I decided to have her on again so that we could catch up and see how things have been going since we last spoke with her. So Cassidy, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us. And how has everything been going?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Things have been interesting since the book has been put out. There's been A little bit of controversy here and there, but on a whole, the book has received an overwhelmingly warm welcome into the world.
Oh, good. Why don't you, for some of our listeners who may not have heard the first interview, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in the paranormal to begin with?
I have been dealing in the supernatural realm for about 10 years, now 11. I began very slowly. I was a gifted kid. I kept it very quiet. I grew up and started to chase legends, chase lore, chase different things, and I actually got involved with a paranormal group out of my area that introduced me to the case that this book is about. And this book isn't a regional book or a book on haunted locations. This book is a memoir of about a 5-year case and my 3 years involved in it.
Now, you co-authored a book on haunted Buffalo, New York. Is that correct?
I did, yes. That was the first publication I ever put out, and that went extremely well. A little bit of a hiccup with few things, but for the most part, that has done extremely well. And I will find people that come up to me and say, "I have your book," So that regionally has done very well, and Buffalo really warmed up to that book. I started writing for Intrepid magazine also under Scotty Roberts, and I have enjoyed that immensely. So when I totally switched gears when I put this out. It wasn't something that was planned. It wasn't something that I really wanted to do until I sat down and did it. So I kind of switched gears, and now in the future I'm switching again. I'm going to fiction.
Yeah, well, it's good when you can sort of stretch your limits and go do different genres like that. I know I like to do that too, and hopefully it'll be an easy transition, because sometimes people are only familiar with some kinds of your work, and then when they encounter this new stuff that you write, they're kind of confused because they think, oh, this is Cassidy, she's only written this factual book, I didn't know she did this other stuff.
Right.
So hopefully that'll go well.
Well, the book you have out now is just a bit on the dark side too. It's a true story about demons and exorcism too, so it's an interesting book.
Well, I think the word demon is overused in the world, and I think that whatever I never say demonic, I never say demon, and I was very careful to not say it because of the fact that it is so overused, and there is so much that comes with that. And with the exorcism, I had put it in there because there was a folly exorcism attempt by a self-proclaimed demonologist, and the reason I put it in there was to show people that just because you say something doesn't mean that's what you are. If I were to say, oh, look, the sky is bright green, that doesn't mean it actually is. No matter how intelligent I sound or intellectual I come across, it doesn't mean the sky is green. Mm-hmm. So I think the word demon is very overused. I kept it to like a darker influence or, darker energy, and I kept that as a negative balance, but not diving into, demons.
Well, it was like an evil entity then or something like that. It's something that didn't have good intentions for the family. It was possessing, so to speak.
This thing had been there a long time, and this team that I had been brought into had worked it for over 2 years and had done nothing but made it a mass load worse. When I was involved, they had already lost 7 people. And, when I was brought into that case, I worked in the paranormal, and I did this and I did that, and I had all this fancy equipment, and I was unstoppable. I was so wrong. And it doesn't matter what kind of equipment you have. The only thing that you have is your inner strength when you deal with something like this. There is no other. There is no amount of equipment or knowledge that someone can possess.
I've always found that equipment to be quite useless, actually, when I've gone into any places like this.
I've actually been reading, too. A friend of mine led me on to some of these studies that they're doing in Europe on some of this professional ghost hunting equipment that makes it absolutely useless, that it's not even being read correctly, that these things aren't even used for that purpose. And it's some pretty interesting studies if you go look around Europe a little bit.
I actually find just a good camera, a video recorder, and a digital voice recorder are some of the best things you can use.
That's all I have. I have a camera, I have a digital voice recorder, and that, I have a pair of dowsing rods that were made for me from a couple of my friends in Europe. No, in Australia, actually. And I've kept those, and I use those once in a while, but most of the time I'm using them to find water lines. I think that the biggest tool that a human has is its own body, and nobody seems to understand that.
Well, I mean, not to get off on a little tangent here, but I think a lot of those equipment is designed to detect natural phenomenon like electricity and electrical energy. And there's, of course, a theory that somehow ghosts either interact with that field or produce electricity. But in my perspective, I don't think that ghosts or spirits are on the same, let's say, the same page as those physical forces, so that the equipment really has kind of a limited use when it comes to trying to detect something like a ghost.
I agree.
I agree too. Like say, well, the meter I have, like my EMF meter, is a professional electrician one. And heaven forbid, don't get the one that's got the picture of the ghost on it and has the word ghost anywhere in the title. Well, people do, and unfortunately, you see celebrities doing that too, selling their special ghost meter. If you want to get the equipment, go to a real electronics store and buy the proper tool. You don't need a little ghost on it to make it work.
Yeah, but if you guys go into the study they just did in Europe, I mean, it's only that equipment is only used to measure certain things, and whether or not it blips with phenomena or whatnot, these things are slowly becoming useless out there. And I was shocked when I started reading this stuff. Like I said, a friend put me onto it, and I haven't owned anything like that in, I'd say, 5 years. I had all the equipment at one time, and I started giving it away. I worked in an asylum for about a year, and there were a lot of younger people that were volunteers and things, and they didn't have the money for this kind of equipment, and I ended up giving it away. And I'm glad that I did, because I never touched it anyways.
I actually agree. I mean, I've got all the meters and all the little toys too, and all I use generally is, for the most part, I just use my camera, like say in a voice recorder, but a lot of times just the camera. But I have used my temperature gun a few times. I've had a few interesting results on that. I can't say what it was for sure, but I have found some drastic temperature changes.
Well, before we go too far down this road, we've given a little tease for the audience about what the book is about, but why don't you just go over generally what Diaries of the Dark Side is about and how you came to write the book, just for listeners who are just joining us and they don't really, aren't up to speed on what we're talking about.
Putting this book out was extremely difficult to do, and putting out so much of myself into the world was also very difficult. I'm a very, very private person, but I felt the need to put the things that were also happening to me during the life of this case, and my son, my husband. So it was hard for me, but I figured it was important. And the whole book is basically my memoir. It's what happened to me, what happened to this family, and in a roundabout, there's no way to generalize it, but there was a very, very, very dark influence that was stuck to a property, and it, over the years, attached itself to an 11-year-old boy. And they had all the signs coming, and they, of course, didn't realize it. There's many people that don't even dip into the metaphysical field in their entire life. So when they think that just a series of accidents, it ends up tying together, and it's pretty scary. And this family lost 7 people throughout 5 years. And I was brought in, like I said, 2 years into it by a team that had only made things drastically worse. And I was brought in as a psychic. And like I said, putting myself out there, before I released this book, my coworkers, a few of my family members, they had no idea what I actually did on my part-time. They had no idea. So I had a lot of explaining to do, but it was worth it. And throughout the life of this case, this little boy had changed into several things physically, and he was hospitalized several times. He actually was on the top 10 list of being the most dangerous child in the state at one point. He had been on lockdown. He had been on so many medications, and so many. They were looking into child-onset schizophrenia. They were looking into, sociopathic tendencies. They were looking at all these things, bipolar, but nothing ever seemed to stick, because, my problem with the medical field is there's no balance. It's either a medical thing or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody seems to be looking at this. And when there's this phenomena going on, I mean, at one point, well, several points, this child would have these open sores appear on his hand, right in between. If you look at your hand, your thumb and your pointer finger, down in that meaty part of your hand, these sores would open up and they would ooze this clear liquid. The next day he would wake up and they would look like 10-year-old scars. Some days he would wake up, there would be no scar. Then you'd go back to the next day and they'd be oozing again. And it seemed, in my research, I had never dealt with anything like this. I had dealt with spooky old houses, haunted locations. I knew everything. You don't. The more you know, the less you know. And the more I got involved, the more things started happening in my life. And I ended up splitting away from the team that I was working on it with, and not having any contact with the family for almost a year. And what it was told to me was, when I was excused from the case, was that the family had nothing, they didn't want anything to do with me. They didn't like me. I was a failure. I had gone through several mishaps in my own life, and it was basically put on me with the fact, look what you allowed it to do to you. And so I left it alone. And it was about, like I said, it was about a year later. It was spring. And one day I woke up and I just couldn't stop. And, the whole year I did nothing but, self-educate on what the hell this thing could be. And, I basically write in the book that I was eating books for breakfast because I couldn't get enough. And I needed to know who, what, when, where, and why, and what I had encountered, and why in my own life that my little boy was getting thrown from his bed at 2:47 every night. Why were my coffee tables, my glass top coffee tables, exploding?
Oh, so this had followed you home then?
It was all part of it. It's not like it followed me. This thing had, if you were to imagine a spider, and you'd imagine its body right in the center of the problem, and all those long legs, and this ability to interfere and interface with people that were involved.
Right.
This was strong. And, I had things going on. They would have handymen come over and fix something in the house and kill themselves. The man that helped them put the walls up when they built the house on the property killed himself. He was just about to get married. He was a happy guy.
Yeah, I remember that from the book.
Yeah.
It's not a good sign.
No. And, anybody that had contact with the child once that he really went under, psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, any kind of nurses were suffering. I mean, there was one that they really liked at one point, and she broke her leg. Different psychologists and things. There was one that got a very, very bad illness and put her in the hospital, and nobody would go near this kid. And who's to say that everybody else that was involved may not have had other mishaps that we don't know about? The police force, the EMTs that religiously had to come back to the house.
That's true. People could have had things happen and never even realized it was from that.
These things travel so far and deep, and, they have no conscience. Time means nothing. And people need to realize it. And, about a year from being apart from them, let me go back. When I was first involved, I was not allowed to know the address of the property, the phone number, nothing of the sort. I worked under this gentleman, and he had all the information, which was fine. I had a lot of trust in him. So, this was a few hours from my home. So I didn't really know the way, and I didn't know, the town. And over a year of really, really odd occurrences, I not only found the address, but was able to skip trace their private number. And I remember the day. I remember I was out in front of my garage, and it was sunny, and there was, it had rained the night before, and I got her on the phone. And that moment, I wasn't sure if she wanted to talk to me or not. I had no idea, but I knew that I had to find them again. And she immediately burst out crying and said, "Oh my God, I never thought I'd talk to you again. Things are so bad." And I come to find out that this professional team of demonologists had left them and hadn't seen them since I had saw them.
Well,
and
nice.
All they allowed this child to do was get even worse.
Yeah, they compounded the damage, probably just trying to get a little bit of publicity for themselves.
And they did. There were instances where lectures were being given and everything else. I had put a stop to that. I did put a stop to that. But it did take me, forming a whole new group of people together that were needed, and going back in and hitting this thing again. And we got it. I was very lifted. I felt really good about it. I'm a very healthy person, very athletic stature. During the life of this case, I had carried an inhaler, and I was having problems with blood oxygen levels where I didn't know who, what, when, where, or why. I would forget my name, my birthday. I had had it happen when I was driving. I had been hospitalized. I had to have this inhaler all the time in order to think properly. And I thought, gosh, is this connected, or is this just an odd, health concern? So we licked the thing the first time. We really went in. We put a lot of effort and energy and time in, and a lot of driving, and everything was okay. And there's a bishop that I'm very close to that I work with from time to time. And I remember him pulling me aside one night at dinner and saying, "You must watch for at least 6 months. You have to wait at least 6 months. You're not safe yet." And I said, okay, Jim. And I think it was about 3 to 4 months later, that I got a call, and she was very, from this grandmother of the home, who I refer to as Kathy in the book. And she was very distraught. And, they had all these children in the house because of all of the, problems and things that had happened over the years. They ended up having quite a few of their grandchildren living with them. And their daughter, who was the mother of 4, was just not coming around anymore. And all of a sudden started having very odd things happen to her. She was a dispatcher for a cab company. And she began calling out an address one night that didn't exist, and then start just screaming and blubbering on. And she was transported to the hospital. To this day, she doesn't remember a thing. So she started to come to the house less and less. And, Matthew in the book, who is the little boy who had been through all of this, they said it was like an animal instinct that when, his aunt was coming to the house, 5 minutes before the woman would pull in the driveway, the boy would lock himself in his room. And I remember one night her calling me and saying, "Oh my gosh, she's gone. She's disappeared. Nobody can find her." And I had put in several hours that night. I even, drove to the area, which was very inner city, very bad place, to find a woman that I had only met one time in my life, who thought I was a wacko, of course. And it was, I think, several weeks later, after very, very, urgent phone calls from me, if you get her there, keep her there, because I knew that something was building. And I already knew that whatever this was had, the ability to jump. And it seemed to hit the weakest link, whether it be the dog, whether it be the boy, and in this woman had already lost her husband. He was one of the 7. And from hanging, which was exactly how everybody else had passed. And we finally got her to the house one night, and she walked in and said, "Mom, I'm going to kill myself. You need to help me." So I was working my day job, and I got out at 10 o'clock at night, and I drove a few hours, and we spent the rest of the night working on this woman. And she has done beautifully well since. And after that night, we finally got it in her. I woke up in the morning and I never used my inhaler again. All the problems, the back problems, everything that I go into in the book were gone. And so this thing had long legs, and it could reach out to anybody. Come to find out, some of the things that we found out since that have been absolutely terrible is one of the people that had committed suicide during this had a son out of the country who ended up committing suicide the same way, never knowing his father actually had done that. He was told that he was in a car wreck. Wow. And so, you don't know how far these things can reach.
So where do you think this came from? What do you think was the origin of this dark energy?
Well, the first thing I started doing after my first visit, where I completely lost time and had a terrible day, was trying to start to locate the history on this. And I knew, with there being a very historical property extremely close, that there had to be a connection. There had to be something, linked between the two. And, to come to find out that on that very spot was a Native American internment camp at one point, and, in the beginning of our country's history. And I had gone through and spent hours and hours literally going through the inlets that were on that waterfront and trying to make sure. And, lo and behold, this is where this house sits. And so then we had to work at it with a completely different view that, something that comes from this place, you have to work on the place, but you also have to work on who it's affected. So it was a very large case. It took, like I said, me 3 years and a lot of self-educating. And I will never be an expert. And I don't care if I do this for the rest of my life. I'll never know a hangnail of what I would like to know in the future.
Now, we were talking a little bit earlier about some of these paranormal investigators, and I think we can maybe lighten things up a little bit by talking about some of the things you mentioned in the book about Hollywood-type paranormal investigators and doing that for TV. One of the scenes that sticks out in my mind is that there was a couple of people who, of course, won't mention any names, but they were interviewed for a show but were rejected because they were too overweight. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that situation?
Which is sick. And in writing this book, there were so many things that just wanted to spur out of my mouth like fire, and I kept them quiet because things are meant to stay in people's heads and not exit their mouths. Because no matter how you feel about somebody, it doesn't matter. So in this book, every name was changed. Everything, every likeness was changed.
To protect the innocent and the guilty.
Exactly, actually. And these specific group of people wanted nothing more than to have their faces on the TV. And of course, I've never had a TV. If I had a local couple channels, I was, in my glory because I won't pay for television. And
There's nothing really worth watching.
so I never had that need for fame. I never felt that I needed to be on, something like that. And I figured when they really wanted to go for this, I thought, well, this is kind of exciting, I guess, yeah, I'll help you. And they had flown me to New York City, and I talked to all these people in these, real nice, expensive office chairs. And I can remember sitting there and laughing under my breath at what these people were trying to put together. And, in the book, I literally said, if you want me to be a Ghostbuster, you can kiss my you-know-what. And I left that, and I laughed it off. Well, I come to get a phone call, I don't know, a month later maybe. I don't know the approximate time. And they got a hold of me directly and said, we want you. We want to put you on a showing idea. And I said, what about, the other two? This is what they really wanted, or the other 4 or 5. And he says, oh, no. Their weight was unsatisfactory.
That's irrelevant. That's crazy.
It's not irrelevant for them.
Yeah. Well, that just shows you how fake the TV stuff is.
And it is. I mean, I actually said that on the phone. I said, what do you want? I said, you want to produce something that's real and to teach people. And that's what I told you. Unless you want me to teach somebody or help somebody, I'm not interested. And I said, and I'm not a Barbie doll. I don't have the blonde hair and, the skinny waistline. I don't. And the fact that was what was most important sickened me. It absolutely sickened me. And, they continually tried and I just didn't want to be involved in it. And long after ever being involved with them, the same people, called me back again and said, hey, Cass, we've got something you're really going to like. And it was a showing idea about taking history, and the supernatural and trying to compare them,
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that is what I want to try to get out there.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
Oh, yeah, I jumped right for it. Well, over a series of film screens and everything else, I was let go by the network. Their exact words were, we can't have an intelligent woman in an authority position on a men's cable network. So that right there, I laughed. When the producer called, he was very upset, and I laughed, and I said, that's okay. He goes, what do you mean that's okay? I said, that's totally fine, because it wouldn't have been what I thought it was when I went into it. All of these ghost hunters and all these paranormal investigators, all they want to do is be famous. They want the next best TV show.
Yeah,
and
their 5 seconds of fame.
That's all it's come down to. I mean, real paranormal research, the people that are behind the scenes that I have had a chance to come in contact with and befriend are irreplaceable. I mean, and all these so-called experts, when you were talking about your electronic equipment,
Yeah.
buy it from an electrician store, things,
Right.
and all these experts, they have Frank's boxes. I actually know I was told a story last weekend about a big time group that had gone to a specific location. And I have a Frank's box. I know Frank. I think a lot of him. And these people had no idea how to use the box.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman that owns the location says, oh, no, that's not how you're supposed to use it. You're supposed to do this, this, and this. And they said, well, how do you know? Well, a friend of mine has it, and it was like, even these big time people, if you want to learn how to use something, you got a Frank's box. In some way, you've got a Frank's box. Go to Frank himself. He's an extremely nice guy. You've got a millimeter or an RT EVP. Gary Galka is one of the nicest men you'll ever come across, and he'll help you. He has cards with his email just for that. If they break, he fixes them. You want to learn how to use these things, go to the people that are properly trained or designed them, and not, get matching car magnets and T-shirts and rush into homes saying, hey, your house is haunted.
That is kind of actually a lot of these groups do that. The first thing they do is actually get T-shirts and hats.
Yeah.
And these self-proclaimed psychics and these self-proclaimed demonologists, I mean, you would need lifetimes, you guys, you would need human psychology and religion and history, education to even touch being a self-proclaimed demonologist. And I know experience is a lot of the knowledge that people gain in this field because there is no all-knowing teacher.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, these people go in, if some woman says, I'm a psychic, and she goes in and tells a family member something, that could alter that person's life forever. And if she's pulling it out of her back end, she should be ashamed of herself. And these people, they go in, they want to do this. They think they're movie stars. And it's about research. It's not about money, signs, and fame.
The thing that bothers me really is the fact that I've spent years, when I was like 8, 9 years old, I would sit, normally at that age you're reading what, like, I don't know, the whatever kids read. I was too young at the time for Harry Potter, but I would sit there and read the adult ghost books, books about ghost stories from around the world and metaphysics and things like that. And I would just sit there and read that stuff for years, every book that I could get my hands on. And today, I encounter so many different people who watched Ghost Hunters or Paranormal State, and that's it. And they've done no other research or anything, and they think they can just go out there and
Yeah, they're an expert now.
suddenly they know everything there is to know about ghosts and the paranormal, and they haven't even cracked a book.
So many of these groups you see, these so-called ghost groups, all they do is watch their favorite TV show for a while. They get together, usually a husband and wife and then a few friends, and they come up with a flashy name and some shirts, and wow, they're a ghost group.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, and there's so many of them. And I do know a lot of people that are really, really interested in research, and they're good people. There really are. But how much education is out there? And, I was on a show a little while ago and they said, well, what kind of team do you work with now? And I said, I don't. I have my close knit, I can count my friends on one hand, and I'm lucky to have them. And there's people in my area about an hour from me. There's 2 or 3 that I work with. There's people that I work with in London, Ireland. There's, that we toss information back and forth. And, Tennessee, California, Florida. But if I'm, everybody says, well, do you do investigations anymore? And I said, no.
Well, that's the big thing. Everybody wants you to do that. I don't work. I mean, I've worked with paranormal investigation teams. Don't get me wrong. I think there are some good ones, but I won't join a team because I don't feel like it's worth it to do that for me personally anyway. Some people might get something out of it.
Well, I never have either. I've never been in a group or a team ever. I'm always independent, and I got a few friends I discuss things with or I'll bring with me, but I don't need a group name or a fancy T-shirt to do research.
Yeah. We don't need it to be on TV either. We got
No.
I have found that I am basically I have several teams of people that are in my area or on the East Coast, and if something looks really odd or off to them, they'll call me. Or I have a set of 2 men that are, in my area, one of them being a bishop, that if something is really odd, then the 3 of us will pan together, take care of it. But it's not like I go with one team or another, and I have all these wonderful friends that have these great paranormal teams, and they have all this stuff all the time and all these different investigations. I never go. And it's not rewarding to me to investigate. And so if something's needed or it involves children or some kind of historical event that they're going to need some pulling done on, then I'll help. Mm-hmm. And I don't belong to any team. I don't think I ever will.
Well, I won't either. Plus, if you're on a group or a team and you go out, you've got all these other people in there contaminating the environment. You don't want people with you. You want to go with yourself and maybe one other person, and that's it. You don't want noises. You don't want people walking. You don't need any of that.
Right.
Well, for some things, I will say it's probably better not to go alone, into some situations. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, there's some places you don't want to go. Plus, if you do see something absolutely amazing, you've got an eyewitness too.
Well, even not only just for paranormal reasons, but I mean,
just
like
for safety,
if you're going
right.
into an abandoned building, you might want to bring someone with you.
Well, yeah, if you fall through the floor or something.
That's another pet peeve of mine, are these people watching this stuff on these shows and breaking into these abandoned locations and getting hurt. I mean, I was a kid. I was probably 16, and there was this abandoned house that I really wanted to check out. And, me being as awesome as I was at 16 and indestructible, I stepped through the window of this house, and apparently the wood that was under the carpet was completely gone because I went right through the floor and hit the hot water tank with the left side of my body on the way down. This was before cell phones, and I had to lay there, recover myself enough to get myself out of there because, and I didn't own this property. I actually had done a write-up a little bit ago, and I hadn't released it about just because something looks scary doesn't mean it's haunted.
Exactly.
I've had new houses, old houses, and people don't understand that if you open a window on a house that's been sitting still for 20 years, you cause an effect of what could happen just by altering the pressure on that window. People don't understand when they break in. We have a very, very famous haunted location near here called the Hinsdale House. And it is now empty, and the neighbors have had to be so vigilant in watching it because they've smashed the windows out. They have, done things like this, and I was actually asked to go in and read the property, and I did. I absolutely did. I was under Glenn White and his group, and that was fine. But the windows were smashed out. The ceiling had caved in because somebody was walking through the crawl space because
Yeah.
it was a haunted spot. And they've had police and everything else. The dangers of going into these places, these old asylums or these old county buildings, state buildings that are now abandoned. Plus, not only the danger, the legalities of it.
Well, there was a mansion here that was broken into so often that the police actually moved their headquarters into the mansion
Oh,
in
really?
order to keep people away. Wasn't it the Stickley Mansion? Do you know, John?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, yeah, it's in northern Illinois.
People don't think. They watch it on TV. That's a whole other reason I put the book out. Was I step by step explained what happened on my end during this case, and watching these people be fraudulent and not care about what they said that they were experts in. It was about that money. It was about that good camera shot. And it was about how well
I
they
can't
looked.
tell you how many groups that I know of, and I don't want to get into any detail or anything, but I mean that actually are only in it for the fame, and that's it. It's more than obvious, because if there's an article about you in the paper, they're infuriated they weren't in it with you and stuff like that. It's ridiculous.
Well, paranormal research has become a mockery at the eyes of the rest of the world because of this.
Correct.
And it's a very serious venue. And it's a very interesting and rewarding venue to follow. It really is. I mean, going back into, the metaphysics and history and, even biblically and looking at these things and putting all these pieces together is so rewarding and mind-boggling and wonderful.
Well,
And-
it's an important part of the human experience.
And nobody gets that. And nobody understands that, evil, it's real, it's there, and it will kick you right in the rear end. And if not kill you. And these people are like, oh, we read your book, we think it's really cool, and we want to do this also. And I said, did you not read it carefully? Did you not listen to my words when I said this will kill you, your children, your family? You will die. You will die. And what do you do then? What happens when you get into these things? And I had a couple demon hunters, actually. They call themselves demon hunters.
That's actually hilarious, just the name itself.
Oh, absolutely. And, every time that they go into a haunted location, in quotations, and get, an FU or a swear word, they're dealing with a demon and they're hunting them. And one of them actually stood up at a lecture that I gave a while ago and, said, well, I'm a demon hunter. And I started laughing. And then I got more serious and said, have you ever met God? And the kid looked at me. I said, have you ever met the devil? And he looked at me even weirder. I said, because if you had, you'd be much more soft-spoken and heavier foot.
Well, definitely.
And the kid just looked at me like I was the biggest jerk. And, once you come in contact with things like this, as this is our second recording of the show.
Exactly, which we're going to go into detail on that shortly.
They never leave you. I mean, this is something that sticks with you. You come up against something like that. You turn that flashlight on in that dark room. They can see you and you can see them. That flashlight can never, ever be turned off. Ever. And I think that people need to realize that.
Well, like these people say they're like a demon hunter, like you said. Okay, what do they do if they find one? Give me a break. What are they going to do if an actual...
What, do they rush in with a crucifix and holy water and a cowboy hat on?
That's just it. You just can't go in there and wave some smoke in its face and sprinkle it with water and think it's going to go, okay, I'm going to leave now.
Well, the thing is, before they were a demon hunter, they were Joe Schmo, Pepsi delivery truck driver.
Yeah,
and now they're Joe Schmo demon hunter. I mean, it makes them feel like they're really important.
Well, they have the business
But they're
cards
not.
and the matching hats.
Yeah.
Well,
And you know what's funny? I have business cards, and they say author and lecturer. That's
Right.
it. Because I am not an expert in any field. I will never claim to be an expert in any field. And the more these people know, the less they know. And it crowds their mind. Because if they get this entitlement to them, and they can't even learn any farther because they're done. They're at the end of their path.
Well, another thing
And
that happens to
it's
some of
sick.
these people, Kat, is they become obsessed with certain locations. They might go to one particular place, and all of a sudden they're obsessed with it. Sometimes those things are actually causing you to do that. You think you're being this big adventure. In reality, there's an entity playing with you.
I have seen that firsthand, actually. I have seen it, and it is sad. It is very sad. And I belonged with a group of people at a place, a very well-known haunted location, and I won't mention any names. But I watched the transformation of the person that owned this. into, from a decent person into a monster, monster. And it was this entitlement. This was this me, I, nasty. I mean, the things that these people were doing. And of course, haunted locations are easily, obsessive. They are. They intoxicate you. You see something and you go, wow, that is really neat. And, you can continually work with this, the entities in these certain locations, and it becomes very intriguing. But you can't let it take you over.
No, it's a form of possession, basically.
That's just generally, I think that can be the way with the paranormal too. I mean, you got to have part of yourself grounded in the, not to say the real world necessarily, but the hard and fast world that most people deal with all the time. Otherwise, there's a danger of slipping off into the current.
A lot of them,
if you will.
They do that too. I mean, you'll see like on Facebook's a typical example. All the ghost groups that are on there, they'll take a picture and there's a dust spot on it. Instantly, it's an orb. Instantly, it's Aunt Millie. And then all their friends go, "That's an amazing picture. Oh, I can't believe you caught that." But what you got to do is actually try to disprove stuff. Spend a lot of time trying to disprove it before you actually announce that you've caught something. And that's like my pet peeve.
And the matrixing that people do. They could take a picture of a potted plant in the corner of the room, and the way that the leaves are folded over one another.
Exactly.
Oh my God, there's face. I have seen that. And these people, they want to do this and they're so into it. What are they going to do when they really get faced with something? What are they going to, when something goes through or something attaches and doesn't let go, and their bank accounts are failing and they've lost their job and they're going to commit suicide? What are they going to do then? And people don't understand. And I'm not saying that every entity is nasty, because it's not. I mean, I have come in contact with the entities of people that were really people. And I believe firmly in it. But there is good and bad all over this universe, and people aren't realizing that.
Yeah, matrixing, what you were just talking about, for the people who don't know, is when you look at something, perhaps a bush or a tree, and all of a sudden you see faces. It's something that's just geared in the human brain, though. We're made to do that. Your mind tries to find recognizable objects and things where they're not there. But the thing
You're
is,
looking at a tree, and there's leaves there. You're recognizing it. It's a tree with leaves.
Haven't you seen all the posts on Facebook with the monsters and faces and Abraham Lincoln and trees?
I try to ignore all that stuff.
Every time I actually have somebody float that across my Facebook, I remove them.
Yeah.
I've gotten to the point where I keep removing people daily. And, if anybody says, come see me give a lecture, I'm an expert on this, you're gone.
Yeah, if you say the word expert, right.
There is no all-knowing teacher in a field like this. This is all learning.
No,
expert's
a pet team. We know Mike has a degree in this, though. We discussed it on the last show.
Luckily, that show was not able to air.
Well, okay, we'll go into that.
For mysterious reasons.
Last week, we did an hour interview with Michael and Kat, and we were getting strange noises in the background. And then we got done with that, and I was going to the editing phase, trying to listen, and I was hearing mumbling or chanting, and I was trying to figure out what it was. And lo and behold, the entire episode erased itself and disappeared, and my computer shut off. And I wasn't able to recover anything.
And now this isn't the first time this has happened, is it, to you, Cass?
No, it actually, I've been on several that have had to re-record again, or their microphones shut off, the electric in the building went out, and, it's funny that Cassidy's a party trick, because she can walk in and radio change, or, she can walk in and cars will unlock or lock themselves. And I just bought a brand new Jeep, and I had searched all up and down the East Coast for a manual Jeep that had no electronics in it, and I ended up not even finding one, because of the fact that I will bust them. I will break it, because I will step out of the car for a second and it will lock itself running, whatever. Or, it's amazing. I worked with a man for about 5 years that I no longer work with, and he had a Thunderbird, and he had a door that would never unlock. Never. I mean, he never even used it. You had to shimmy over. I walked up one time and I wasn't thinking, and I put my hand towards the handle and it unlocked. And he looked at me, and I said, sorry, your door's fixed. And at the Knickerbocker Hotel, I was lucky enough to be able to work over the weekend with John Sable and Mike Herman, who are awesome people. And I was very intrigued by them. And when I walked in, when I first got to the hotel, and I'm very good friends with the owner, Peg Knickerbocker, awesome place. I enjoy going there every time I'm there. And I walk in, and here's Mike Herman fiddling with this DVD player and just absolutely at wit's end with it. And he's going, there's something wrong. It just won't work. I've been dealing with this for a couple hours. We really wanted it up in the upstairs bedroom. We can't get this DVD player to work. And I walk over to it and I try to press play and it doesn't work. And I leaned over it and I said, work. And I'll be damned if that thing didn't turn on perfectly.
Sometimes you got to be gentle with those things.
So you're kind of like Fonzie from Happy Days then, right?
No, but I mean, I have had, and this has been since that flashlight was turned on. And that's what I try to get across to people, is this stuff doesn't leave you, ever. I've had people, very well-known psychics and things like that people know, that have threatened me. Don't you ever come into a gallery reading because you'll fill up the room. You carry so much with you. And these things, you may remove them. You may get them to pack their bags and remove themselves from that particular situation, but you don't kill them. You don't disperse them. Oh, I'll be gone. No. They have no time, no space. They don't care. You can remove them and make them uncomfortable enough in a situation, but they never go away. And once you come up across something like that, it remembers you and it knows where you are all the time.
Well, on last week's show, I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Something was there. I'm not saying it's paranormal, but something unusual was happening, and there apparently was another low voice or something coming underneath your voice every now and then. And like I say, when I tried to isolate it, it actually up and deleted itself. And the program I'm using has got multiple fail safes where you can't accidentally delete things, and it deleted itself. And I can't explain it. And I'm I'm not jumping to saying it's paranormal. I'm just saying it's quite unusual.
It is unusual because I didn't hear anything. I mean, you're the only one who heard that.
And
he also has very high sensitive equipment with him, though.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm not saying that you're making it up. I'm just saying that it's not like it was some interference that we all heard.
Right. Well, studio headphones are actually a lot more sensitive too. I can hear everything.
You actually had to cancel your show last week due to this.
Yes, and I meant to thank you for that.
No problem. Anytime. Anytime that I can screw up your radio program that week, you just call me. I
was actually having a bad week, and then this was going to be our main interview. We got an hour and 10 minutes, and I was going to go through the editing phase, and I was all excited that I was isolating some bizarre background voice, and I thought that was going to be the highlight of the show, being able to finally air something like this, and poof, show's gone. I got so mad. Show's over. I quit.
I actually, when I received your email in the middle of the night there after we had done the interview, the next morning over coffee, I said to my husband, were you guys playing any YouTube videos of chanting or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm
he
sure.
looks at me and he says, no. And I said, were you talking or grumbling at all? And he says, no, I know the radio rules. When Cassidy's on the radio, everybody stays at the other end of the house and whispers. And I said, so you guys were not playing any oddities or doing anything? And he says, no, Cass, we were quiet. We're always quiet for you. So that was interesting in itself because I actually tried to back up too to see if, possibly, I mean, not the deleting and everything, but, that it could have come from my end. And laptops, I go through a laptop a year. Mm-hmm. Easy. I'll, and it depends on the case. The one case that's in, Diaries of the Dark Side, I went through 3 computers. 3. And 3 hard drives.
Well,
and
I actually certainly hope that the listeners get to hear this week.
Yeah.
At this point, they might not hear it. I'm not quite sure, but hopefully they do.
Yeah, make a backup copy.
Yes. The second our interview is over, I'm making a full copy.
I thought you were kidding. When you texted me and said it was gone, I was like, man, that is not funny. I thought he better not be joking.
No, that was actually 1 a.m, too. I was so excited about hearing that background, the chanting or talking, that I was so psyched on it. I started working on it instantly because I was trying to isolate it.
And that's interesting about the chanting and the talking that you said you were hearing, because in the book, I literally, I type out everything that was off a certain recording that I possess. And there's 3 people in the world that have heard it. 3. And the stuff that was going on in the background of that recording was so terrifying. Not only what the little boy was coming out with, not only that, because we had trained her by then, if the boy starts acting odd, you turn that recorder on. The things that the chanting and the fast talking and the mumbling behind was very, very scary in its own. And it, when we were doing this first interview last week, you keep going, I keep hearing that. Are you guys hearing this? And I said, no, but it's normal. Well, lo and behold, you lose your whole interview when you try to figure out what it was.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of editing for last week's because in the middle of the interview for our listeners, I'd stop and be, can you hear that? Because I was hearing all this bizarre stuff. And a couple times, Michael heard some things, but I don't think it was chanting because he stopped and asked, can you hear that? And then Kat's like, I don't hear anything. What's wrong?
Well, I just heard like static. It could have been someone like blowing their nose or something. I don't know. But it definitely wasn't any sound. It wasn't like a talking or anything. It was more like a static sound.
Not only that, John, you were having terrible times with your microphones last week. You couldn't get them on stereo. You were having a heck of a time.
Well, actually, that's still not fixed. My entire studio is not working up 100% since I've talked to you last week.
Well, thanks a lot.
That's actually not funny, Mike, because I'm actually being serious.
That was my door slamming. Sorry, my son came out and said, Mom.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we're
I'm like, oh crap, it started again.
Way to talk about it, boys. Way to talk about it.
Okay, so let me ask, new projects. What are you working on now for the future?
I actually have a lot on my plate right now. I have a series of 3 fictional novels that I have produced, and I mean they still need a lot of work, but I took the time to take my character, because I am a character, and I comic booked her. I made her very cool, not that I am. And basically, several cases and oddities and visions and things that I have handled in my life, I used as a ground play to write these books. And I'm very, very excited about them. They are very, very crude at some points. They can be grotesque at some points. I love it. But it went on the fact of, I don't think vampires sparkle and go to high school. And I wanted to produce a set of books that were more, I guess, hardcore than the normal fiction out there.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of fun producing that. And I also am diving heavier and heavier as time goes by into a project that's really kind of looking into religious conspiracy and the similarities and the differences since, man's beginning. And that has been extremely intriguing and look at it from an astrological point of view. And, here I am with the highlighted Bible, with all the different stickers on the sides of the pages, because I've been going through all these different religious texts. I don't care what religion or way of life, down to the ancient Egyptians, the Sumerians, and looking at some of the things that they had produced. So I'm really jumping into that, and I love that project.
Oh yeah, it sounds really interesting. And I'll definitely look forward to hearing more details about that in the future.
And I also, on a side note, I write for Intrepid magazine, like I said earlier in the show, and that has been a riot. Some of the stuff that magazine has really been rewarding to me, and some of the interviews that I've been able to get from people that don't talk about their private lives, that don't go into details about themselves. They do with me, and it's one of those things. It's nice to have friends in high places, because I've been able to open people up and let the world see them for who they are and how they want to be seen, not how, some TV star portrays them or how people think they are. I've been pretty rewarded in my writing. I'm very lucky.
And you also do small appliance repair too, don't you?
More like the other end of it.
You go in when people are broke, you just touch their blender and it turns on,
No, but that's, that's not what I was meaning by the DVD player, but that really happened, and it was funny. It was, because here's Mike Herman. He is an awesome guy. And I mean, when it comes to technology, he knows his stuff. And I was so fortunate to be able to be an experience with him and John Sable. I mean, that was fun. And I had not been in the building for 5 minutes, and I'd walked over and said, work.
I tell you, next time you're in the Chicago area, we're going to walk through perhaps Sears or Walmart, the appliance section, and see what happens.
This is true.
If everything turns on there, that is going to be so cool.
Sorry, I had my 5-year-old come back out. I'm sorry.
I love the way you explain every noise now. I like that.
Well, it's my son's in the background, and you're talking, and he's going, Mom, I need to talk to you.
Well, you certainly, it sounds like you need to take care of something. So
okay,
we'll wrap this up. We'll let you go. Thanks for coming on again.
And we pray that this actually airs this Sunday.
Remember, again, the book is Diaries of the Dark Side by Cassidy Oconnor. Get it for Kindle and Nook, and, of course, on Amazon.com.
Bye.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right, that was Cassidy Oconnor and Michael Clean.